Hi everyone, my name is Matt. I'm bringing you a Imperial Order deck profile. This is going to be another moderately jank deck profile, but it's a fairly interesting one in my view. It's Mekk-Knight Crusadia Kaiju. Basically, I think this deck is a really fun and good deck to play if you've been out of the game for whatever reason. Obviously, at the moment, that could be due to the pandemic, meaning that we don't see a lot of actual sort of in-person play at the moment. It's a fairly linear kind of deck with a simple win condition, and it will allow you to sort of basically steal games, quote unquote, from your opponent before they sort of see it coming. So without further ado, I'm going to go into the deck profile now. We'll start with the monsters. So obviously, as the name implies, we're playing three engines. We are playing the Mekk-Knight, we are playing the Crusadia, and we are playing the Kaiju engine. No invoked this time, unfortunately. So let's start with the Mekk-Knight aspect of it. So we're playing the fairly standard Mekk-Knight package, which is 3 Nightfall, 1 Eclipse, and a Blue Sky. I think that those ratios have been locked in for a good while now. Obviously, the way Mekk-Knights work is you special summon them into a zone that has more than one card in that column. And that obviously synergizes really well with Crusadia, which we're going to go into now. So we play 14 Crusadia monsters. We play 3 Maximus, 3 Draco, 2 Reclusia, 2 Arborea, and 2 Leonis. Basically, the reason we do these ratios is because we want to see 2 Crusadias in your opening hand, but ideally you want them to be of different names, which is why we're running so many 2-ofs. I play 3 Maximus and Draco because these are probably the 2 most important ones at the moment. Maximus is the one that basically lets you go for the kill. He allows you to inflict double battle damage on your opponent, which is the main win condition of the deck. And Draco, he lets you add a Crusadia from your graveyard to your hand. So the Crusadia that you've normal summoned, you can then reuse it. Using its special summon effect. All Crusadia main deck monsters, by the way, can special summon themselves to a zone that a linked monster points to, which really allows you to kind of just sort of keep getting them on the board. So Crusadia Draco is sort of used as an extender, or just sort of as an enabler to let you reach into the kill, usually using Maximus. Reclusia is really good for spot removal. Leonis, to be honest with you, his effect isn't necessarily important. He's really just there as a name. And Arborea, she's decent for a defensive play. She's kind of got like a Salaman Great Bailnix effect, where she can banish herself to stop a Crusadia from being destroyed. And obviously she's a tuner, so that allows you to do Halqifibrax plays as well. But realistically, they're just sort of there as names. And then obviously we've got the Kaijus. So we are at the moment we are playing 5 Kaijus of different names. We're not playing the 2 big boys, so we're not playing Jizukiru or Thunder King. We're just playing Dogran, Ghidala, Gamasiel, Radiant, and Humongous. To be honest with you, which Kaijus you pick don't particularly matter. I just kind of go for the small ones because realistically, in this deck, the size of the Kaiju doesn't actually matter too much. Ideally, you're just sort of using them there to hit them in the face and kill your opponent. And then finally, rounding out the monster lineup, we've got the 2 Jet Synchrons and 1 Mecha Phantom Beast O-Lion. So obviously Jet Synchron really is there to access the Halqifibrax play. The reason I only play 2 Jet Synchron is because this deck relies quite a lot on your opening hand to do its play. And you want to see ideally 2 Crusadias of a different name plus a Mekk-Knight or a Kaiju, or all of those things, you know, for the God Hand. So you kind of want to keep anything else to an absolute minimum. The reason I run him at all is because Halqifibrax is a really strong card, and also there is a play which allows you to, if you see no Crusadia. In the past, if you saw no Crusadia in your opening hand, you were pretty well stuffed. It was quite hard to kind of get to the Crusadias, but there is a play which allows you to turn Jet Synchron into a resolved Magius, which I'll go through later. And then the last monster that we play is 2 Nibiru. The reason that I play this one is just because I think it's the most impactful hand trap in the immediacy. There's a decent argument to be made to replace it with Ash Blossom, especially considering that the Nibiru token that you summon can't be used as part of the OTK with Crusadias, because Crusadias only gain attack equal to an effect monster, of which the token is not one. So with Nibiru, you would want to drop it as early as possible in their play to keep the token as small as possible, and then hopefully use Nibiru himself, which obviously can be used by Crusadia, as the fuel for hopefully an OTK. There is a decent argument to be made to swap this out for Ash Blossom in the current meta. And then for spells, we are playing 3 Lightning Storm. It's basically just a really expensive negate bait. Obviously, clearing out back row is really, really important. This deck, that's this deck's main weakness is back row. And also, there's an interesting sort of dynamic with this deck where you don't want your opponent to much like Cyber Dragons, I think, you don't really want your opponent to control no monsters. Really, you don't want to nuke the whole front row. You want them to control a monster, which you can then use to facilitate the OTK. So with that in mind, that's why we play the 2 Interrupted Kaiju Slumber. Basically, if your opponent is playing a control deck, so they've all got back row, or and maybe you've Lightning Stormed it or something, or if they're just sort of wise to your play, and they may have just passed with an open board. Interrupted Kaiju Slumber lets you kind of play around that by, if you summon a Crusadia monster and you have a Borea in your graveyard, however you achieve that, you can then resolve Kaiju Slumber, banish a Borea to protect your Crusadia, and then you'll be dropping the Kaiju on your opponent's side of the field, and then you can just use that to go into the OTK play. Anyway, we play the 2 of Call by the Grave because this deck is quite vulnerable to hand traps, which is also why we play Gravedigger's Trap Hole and Rafflesia, because we can use Parallel Exceed, who I forgot about earlier. Whoops, sorry guy. So we can use Parallel Exceed to go into Rafflesia, which is a play I'll explain in a moment, but Gravedigger's Trap Hole basically makes the board Nibiru-proof. And finally, we have the 2 Crusadia spells. We have Crusadia Power and Crusadia Revival. Crusadia Power is probably, it's a very, very important card. It basically makes your Crusadia monster unaffected by card effects. So that can be used to protect your Crusadias as you're trying to get into the OTK, or it can be used to give an additional layer of protection to your Mekk-Knight Crusadia Avramax if things go awry and you need to sort of make a defensive play. And we play finally Crusadia Revival. Basically, it's another option. It lets you attack all monsters your opponent controls, so it basically allows you to sort of OTK using maybe a smaller Crusadia like Regilex or mainly Regilex. In fairness, the other 2 can't really get that impressive, but yeah, it'll allow you to sort of kill that way. But also, if your opponent has a monster pointing to your Crusadia, so let's say Echomax is on the field and he's pointing to a monster, usually a Kaiju, you can basically you treat the monster he's pointing to as a hole in their defense. You discount that monster's attack gain from Echomax. So if you can get an Echomax pointing to a Maximus with 4,000 or more attack, not including the attack he gained from the monster he's pointing to, that's game. And Revival will allow you to do that, because basically you either need to have him pointing to another monster with 400 or more attack, or you can have a Revival on the field, which gives him an additional 500 attack, which is really, really nice. Obviously, a lot of the times you'll be searching these 2 using Regilex, and you'll have to pick one or the other. I think really you kind of want to commit. When you start the play, you want to decide which one you're going to go for. It's really a case of assessing the risk of being stopped. If you think there's any chance of you being stopped at all, you really want to kind of get power and sort of go into the Avramax play. If you think that you're going to be able to clinch it, obviously you grab a Revival and end the game as quickly as possible. Next up, we'll go into the extra deck. I think the most important cards in the extra deck are Crusadia Magius, IP, Regilex, Echomax, and Avramax. So I'll go through those first. Magius and basically all the Crusadia cards are kind of used to facilitate the OTK. You will use Magius to search whatever component you're missing. You'll use Regilex to search the component to back them up, one of these 2 cards. And then you'll use Echomax to hit them really, really, really hard. Pretty simple stuff. If it doesn't work, the normal plan B is to summon Avramax using IP Masquerena, which is quite easy to do in this deck. And IP summoned Avramax, if you don't know, cannot be targeted by card effects, cannot be destroyed by card effects, and if you were to attempt to try and run him over, he would gain attack equal to the monster attacking him and win that battle. Also, if you do somehow manage to out him using a card effect, he gets to shuffle 1 card your opponent controls back into the deck. So obviously the plan B is to create this sort of like a Towers-esque card. The flaw in that is that it doesn't provide any interaction on your opponent's turn. This deck really is it's not got the best grind game on earth. It doesn't have any grind game really. It's a explosive deck, and the plan B really is just to make this guy and hope your opponent can't out him. If you can make him and back him up with Crusadia Power, that obviously really, really complicates matters for the opponent. That'll then make Avramax unaffected by card effects. At which point, realistically, your opponent will have to kaiju him, otherwise they're not going to get rid of him that turn. So for the rest of the extra deck, we have Crocodragon Archethys, we have Desert Locusts, we have Traptrix Rafflesia, Boral Sword Dragon, Halqifibrax, Link Spider, and Link Karibo. So obviously the Archethys and Desert Locusts are the another backup play, another option that you've got using Halqifibrax. And Traptrix Rafflesia you will summon using Parallel Exceed. So, and that will make your board Nibiru proof. So basically how it works is you will link summon Crusadia Magus, you will use Parallel Exceed's effect to special summon to a zone Magus points to. You can then use Exceed's effects on field to chain block Magus's search, get another Exceed, overlay them because they become level 4 into Rafflesia, and then Rafflesia using Gravedigger's Trap Hole will be able to negate the Nibiru. If you're wondering, Rafflesia will be the 5th summon, so it will get there just in the nick of time. That's pretty much the entire reason that we play Rafflesia and Gravedigger. Parallel Exceed can be used to extend if for whatever reason your opponent's able to remove a monster, or if you need to do an alternative play to try and secure a kill, or the defensive plays. Parallel Exceed can be an option to do that if Rafflesia for whatever reason isn't needed. We play Boral Sword because obviously this is a Go Second OTK deck, and sometimes Boral Sword Dragon is more than enough to accomplish that. And then finally we play Link Spider and Link Karibo because of the Jet Synchron play, which I alluded to earlier. This deck doesn't really kind of go into the combos because I think a lot of it is quite sort of very easy to pick up when you actually try and play the deck yourself, and a lot of it is very firmly established anyway. The best thing I would describe this deck as is a combo Go Second deck. It kind of has a couple of choke points where your opponent can really, really hurt you, but other than at those points, if you're able to play around them, using Power or Call by the Grave or anything like that, or Gravedigger's Trap Hole, for example, you then basically have got quite a free-form approach. You've got lots of different ways of accessing the various routes to your OTK. However, one of the things that can pretty well scupper you is if your opening hand doesn't have the stuff that you want in it. Namely, in the past, if you didn't see a single Crusadia, you would really, really struggle to get into the OTK. Jet Synchron plus Link Spider plus Link Karibo plus a second Equimax can get you, obviously plus Halqifibrax as well, can get you into that to that play. So I'll just go through this combo real quick because I think it's not a standard combo for the deck. So you normal summon Jet Synchron and you link Jet Synchron off into Link Karibo, pretty standard. Discard one, bring back Jet Synchron, and link him and Link Karibo off into Halqifibrax. You then use Halqifibrax to go into O-Lion, and then you use Halqifibrax and O-Lion to go into Equimax. You then link Equimax into Crusadia Magus, and you use O-Lion's effect to bring out the token. You then use a token to go into Link Spider, which will then activate Magus' effect, which will let you search a Crusadia, and then you can do your Crusadia plays from that point. You really are going around the houses and you're stretching pretty far to reach into this, but it does add quite a bit of consistency into actually allowing you to get the Crusadia play off, and depending what else you have in the hand, it will pretty much win you the duel on that turn if you're able to resolve it. As I say, this deck really does sort of focus on punching your opponent in the face really, really hard with Equimax and killing them before they realise they're in danger, and this adds, I believe, an additional layer of sort of consistency into getting into that. Obviously, if you can't get into that, you can just use Jet Synchron and Halqifibrax to do like the Desert Locusts and Crocodragon Archethys sort of style play as a backup, or you can try and reach into the Avramax IP play as well. Okay, so now I'm going to go into the side deck. Normally for these deck profiles, I wouldn't really go into the side deck because a lot of it is very meta dependent. Just for reference, at the moment the meta is Eldritch and Adamantipator. So this is kind of entirely relevant, but there are a couple of cards that I want to sort of go into. So firstly, there can be only one. I don't think there can be only one is particularly strong in this exact format, but Crusadia really can run there can be only one quite effectively. If it's face up on the field, the only interaction I believe that it stops is using Jet Synchron to go into Halqifibrax. You can't do that anymore, or using Reclusia to go into Magus. Pretty much anything else is fair game. So I think it's potentially really, really strong for Floodgate in the right format. The next card I want to address is Infinite Impermanence. I think Imperm absolutely could make it into the main deck. Probably in this format, it probably should make it into the main deck because, really you do want to have the monster negations. And obviously with any Mekk-Knight deck, Impermanence has even more utility. And then finally, we want to talk about Pot of Avarice. So I think general wisdom is that you playing a consistency card in your side deck is a really, really bad idea. However, I think with Crusadia in particular, you don't want to play it in your main deck because the deck is explosive. You just sort of do your combo and ideally you win that turn. You don't win that turn, you make your Towers monster and you sort of hope that that's enough. But then From that point onwards, the grind game it really is a massive struggle. Pot of Avarice, if you are forced to go first by your opponent, so say for example game 2, you will side in Pot of Avarice, and that will allow you to go through all the cards that you need to go through to make your Avramax IP play. And then Avarice will reset your extra deck, and it will reset your main deck, and give you obviously a draw 2 as well, to allow you to get the additional tiny bit of grind required to then turn 4, for example, kill them. Using your first battle phase, you've got everything that you require to go into the Crusadia OTK. So I think this is one of the very few instances where playing a consistency card in your side deck may actually pay off with Crusadia. So that's it for the profile. I guess in summary, what I want to say about this deck is that it's kind of, it's easy to sort of say that it's a gimmicky deck, and it is fairly gimmicky, but I also think that it's got a very well-defined and easy to understand win condition. It has quite a lot of varied ways to get to that win condition, and also it's fairly sort of meta-independent. You can come back from a game not really knowing the game very well at that point in time, and you can play this deck with pretty much maximum efficiency so long as you know this deck. Obviously, if your opponent summons, say, a load of back row negates and like a couple of front row negates, you can just kaiju the front row negate away, and the back row becomes pretty much irrelevant. And realistically, you can sort of steal wins from your opponent using that method. I think a lot of the times you won't see it coming, and sometimes you can have the best deck in the world, you can have the best player in the world, and they just will not have a response to this. So I think it's a very good deck, maybe for people who have got, for one reason or another, a limited amount of technical play. It could be because they've not played for a while, could be because they're a new player. For whatever reason, I think it's one of those decks that really will sort of punch above its weight, so to speak, in a competitive setting. So that's it for this deck profile. Thank you very much for watching. I know this is sort of it's a very new channel. If you enjoy these sort of in-depth deck profile sort of views, I guess, that I'm creating, please consider liking the video or even subscribing to the channel. I will try and produce more content and get other members of the team as well. Hopefully it won't just be my voice you'll be listening to the whole time, and we'll be aiming to produce quite a varied amount of content as well. So yeah, thank you very much, and I'll see you next time.